Let's talk about Jane Wickline. She's one of the newest people on Saturday Night Live, and maybe one of the most debated cast members we've seen in a long, long time. I mean, when it comes to her comedy, there is just no middle ground.
This one comment from a fan forum really just hits the nail on the head. You either totally get it, or you're sitting there going, wait, what's the joke? So what is really going on here? Why is she such a lightning rod? Well, in this explainer, we're going to try to figure that out. We're going to unpack the really intense criticism, we'll dig into the generational defense of her whole style, and we'll trace her very online origins to see how a comedian becomes the center of a huge cultural debate.
Okay, so to understand the hate side of this, you have to go where the real diehard fans are, the ones who watch the show like it's a sport. On the SNL subreddit, a user put together this, honestly, it's an almost forensic breakdown of her first season, and the criticisms are super specific.
And when you see it all laid out like this, a really clear pattern starts to show up. This analysis points to the same kind of issues popping up over and over again. She's accused of staring at cue cards, of breaking character on Weekend Update, and her very popular songs, well, they're seen as just reusing the same old awkward bit.
So for the critics, it really all boils down to this. They see a performer who just hasn't figured out how to do live, ensemble TV. The argument is that she's a one-trick pony, always playing that same deadpan, awkward character, and that her style just feels, well, more at home on TikTok than on that iconic stage in New York City. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, what if all those things that people are calling flaws aren't flaws at all? What if they're actually the entire point? And that brings us to the other side of this whole thing, the Gen Z defense.
This is the absolute core question, isn't it? Is her awkwardness a failure to perform, or is that the performance? Is her monotone delivery a sign that she lacks range, or is it a super deliberate comedic choice that maybe a different generation just isn't built to understand?
Her defenders would say her style is a perfect example of what people are calling the Gen Z effect. It's this style of communicating that comes from growing up totally online. It's all about keeping your emotions in check and being super sensitive to anything that feels fake or try-hard. You could almost call it the comedy of being existentially exhausted. And this just throws that generational divide into sharp relief. I mean, for decades, SNL was dominated by Gen X sarcasm. Think Will Ferrell, or that big, earnest millennial energy, like an Andy Samberg. Wickline's quiet, hyper-aware style is just a completely different comedic language. And the argument is that people who are fluent in the old styles are having a really hard time understanding the new one.
So, to really get the full picture, you kind of have to look at where she came from. Her comedy wasn't sharpened in traditional improv clubs or on stand-up stages. It was developed on the internet.
Her rise was incredibly fast. I mean, think about it. She starts making TikToks in 2020, and by September 2024, she's on Saturday Night Live. Her entire training ground was the internet, from making her own videos to joining a sketch show that was streamed live on TikTok. It is a totally different road to the main stage.
Now, of course, you can't talk about her casting without mentioning something that comes up online all the time, her family connections. Her mom once worked as an assistant to Lorne Michaels himself, and her dad was a writer for David Letterman. And that's absolutely fueled a lot of the nepotism debate around her.
But then you hear her own story about the audition, and it adds this whole other layer. She said she showed up for her screen test about 40 minutes early, and they let her go see the stage when it was totally empty. She said the second she saw it, the weight of it all just hit her, and she burst into tears.
And you have to remember, that moment came after this absolutely grueling summer-long audition process. She'd gone through round after round, and apparently she didn't even know if she was being considered as a writer or a performer until the very final call. It just gives you some perspective on the kind of pressure that comes with trying to join a show like that.
So when you put all of this together, the criticism, the generational defense, the online career, Jane Wickline stops being just a cast member. She becomes, well, almost a case study for a massive shift happening in the world of comedy. This is really the heart of the story. It's about what happens when a creator who is fluent in the language of the internet collides with the very old, very established traditions of live broadcast television. It's a real tension between two totally different worlds of entertainment.
And that brings up a huge question for all of us. Is her journey the new normal? Are the days of grinding it out in improv theaters and comedy clubs being replaced by just building a massive following online first?
Which leaves us with the biggest question of them all. If this is the future, what does that mean for comedy itself?
When the path to getting famous changes this much, what new skills are gained, and what important ones might be getting left behind? That really is the unsolved case of Jane Wickline.